Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to spend some time with me on the video. And guys, today we're going to be talking about one of the most overlooked aspects of bass fishing in terms of catching fish, and that is the speed and how you run your trolling motor. Now, everybody gets caught up on lures and techniques and electronics and, GPS mapping and that type of deal. But I can tell you right now that one of the biggest things that anglers lack are being masters at running a trolling motor and understanding how your boat moves, understanding how fast you need to move it, and understanding the dynamics of using a trolling motor. This is one of those things in fishing that's not sexy. A lot of people ignore it. I see very few people that are true masters at running a trolling motor. And I have spent a lot of time, 5 decades, learning how to run one, and I want to give you guys some tips and advice. Definitely think it's going to help you guys out in today's video. Also, guys, before we get started, just a quick invitation. I'd just like to thank everybody that has taken time to use and bookmark my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video and every video. Guys, what the deal is that I got a deal with Tackle Warehouse where if you guys use that link I put in the description, the channel gets a small percentage of any commission that you on tackle that you buy. So if you want to support intuitive angling, that's probably one of the best ways you can do it, and also get some good deals on tackle, because man, Tackle Warehouse is the best source to get tackle, rods and reels, batteries, whatever you need for fish, and they got it. So I'll put that link in the description. Appreciate that. Okay guys, let's talk a little bit about considerations, what you need to think about when you're running the trolling motor and the speed of the trolling motor. So first of all, before we get into all the details and the nitty gritty, I want to tell you about a little conversation I had with a friend of mine that was a diver about probably 20 years ago, and he also bass fished, and he was wanting to observe bass in terms of how boats affected them and how boat noise and how they reacted to it. So anyway, he'd go out there with his buddy, and he'd put a scuba suit on. He'd go down there, and his buddy would be messing around with the boat. And one of the things that he said is that when the trolling motor was on, it's like, say for example, you're running your trolling motor and you got your foot on the on button and the blade's turning. The bass did not really mind that much, but what they did mind is when they stopped and started it. So say he went 10 foot on the trolling motor and then he took his foot off the pedal and then he started it up again, it would literally spook the bass. So that's one underlying element I want to talk about right off the bat that you can do in terms of not alerting the bass to your presence quite as much. Now, you can't hide from the fish. That's one thing you need to remember, guys. If you say, for example, you got you see 100 foot in front of you or 200 foot or whatever, you got a lay down tree in front of you, and you shut your motor off and you slowly start working your way to that piece of cover. Those bass know you're there. They know you're there when you were shutting your big motor down, 300, 100 yards away from them. But you're trying to keep the noise down to a minimum, because bass, they have evolved to react to noise decibel levels. That's why fishing is always better during the week, is because you have a decreased amount of noise decibel levels from, boat traffic, big motor noises, electronic pings, trolling motor noises, and bass react to that the same way as a frontal system. In my opinion, when a bass is born, boat noise is part of their environment. They don't know anything different. It's just part of their world on most public lakes. So bass will get active or inactive more based upon the noise decibel levels, the same way they do like if it's before a cold front coming in and after a cold front coming in. So that's one thing you have to remember about that you're never going to fully eliminate or sneak up on them, but you can reduce your noise decibel levels. So when you're running your trolling motor, try to remember that aspect of it. You want to try to dial your trolling motor back in speed to where you don't have to take your foot on and off of the pedal. That's the main thing. And that determination has a lot to do with everything else like running a trolling motor. You have to consider factors like current and wind direction and how fast you want to come in on your cover in order to dial your trolling motor back to the proper speed. For me, most of the time, the speed that I run the trolling motor is relative to the technique that I'm fishing, because like I've got a Minn Kota Ultrex 80. It's got the dial on it, like 1 through 10. So on mine, for example, if I'm just fishing, and I'll talk about positioning here in a second, but if I'm just fishing down a bank, I usually have my trolling motor on about 3 or 4, usually closer to 3. If I'm pitching and flipping and I'm working real slow, I'll probably put it on 2. If I'm fishing something a little bit faster, maybe like a swim bait or something, I'll have it on 3. If I'm fishing something even a little bit faster, like a crankbait or burning a spinnerbait, I'll have it on 4. But unless the wind is blowing where I have to navigate wind or current, I don't hardly ever go above 4. Try to maintain the slowest possible speed you can where you can still cover water and be efficient. And that's the thing as far as when you're picking the speed on a trolling motor. You don't want to think in terms of fishing slow, faster, and medium pace. You want to think in terms of fishing the most efficient speed based upon the technique that you're fishing. So every technique has a different degree of level of speed that you can go at. Probably the slowest technique that you can fish is the actual flipping technique, where you're flipping with a fixed amount of line and you're dobbing every 4 or 5 feet down the bank. Then you have to go like a snail. And then if you're like burning a spinnerbait or fishing something that you're reeling fast, like a lipless crankbait or something, that can be on the higher end of the speed spectrum. But regardless, in normal conditions where you don't have much wind or don't have much current, I would suggest never putting your trolling motor above 4. If you do that, you simply can't effectively and efficiently fish down the bank. You don't want to go like a snail all the time though, because I see it on the other end too. I see sometimes people they're just not covering any water at all. I mean, they'll get on a stretch of shoreline and they'll just like, they'll just creep along like they're barely moving. And that's just as bad, because in bass fishing, you have to determine the pace that you need to fish at in terms of like your retrieve on your reel, as far as the, how fast you're reeling your lure, how fast you're moving your boat. And it's a learning curve there. There's a learning curve on picking the fastest speed, the proper speed. Probably what I see, the new anglers that get started out, for the most part, they probably fish a little bit too slow. Younger anglers I've seen, they fish too fast. They keep their trolling motor on high more. I had this one friend of mine, guys. He was a crankbaiter. He's a shallow water crankbaiter. And every time I fished with him, he'd have his trolling motor. He never turned it below 7 or 8. He had it on 7 or 8 constantly, and he'd be on and off it and on and off it, and he didn't want to waste any time between cover. He still caught fish, but he probably would have caught more fish if he would sort of dial that back. So running a trolling motor and understanding the speed of a trolling motor is a true art form. And this is one of those things that you can't go out and just learn it in one day. It has to be something that you are constantly improving and constantly like perfecting, because again, you have tons of different variables. Not only do you have the wind and the current as a variable, but you also have the weight of your boat. A boat like mine, like my Vexus 1980 aluminum, it's a light boat, so it doesn't take as much to stop and start it. But if you're in a big 21-foot fiberglass boat with a 250, it takes a lot more to get you going and a lot more to get you stopping. So say, for example, if you're approaching a piece of cover in the water, one of the things that you have to remember is you do not want to come into that piece of cover too slow or too fast. You want to come into that piece of cover where you can slowly glide in position and not use your trolling motor at all, and then make your presentation. So learning the weight of your boat has a lot to do with that. Get comfortable and get familiar with how heavy your boat is and how much force it requires to stop it and start it without backwashing. You never want to backwash. Guys, if you backwash into a piece of cover, you pretty much ruin that piece of cover. So never put yourself in a position. That's why you always have to calculate as you're approaching cover. You have to calculate the angle of the sun, the weight of your boat, the wind speed, the current direction, all that type of stuff has got to be taken into consideration, and it takes practice to do that. So don't ever overlook that skill. This is a skill set, guys, that is when you are with somebody that's a master of running a trolling motor, it's beautiful to watch, because They don't ever look down at their trolling motor. They can back up just as good as they can go forward. If you get hung, if your co-angler gets hung up in the back of the boat, they can back it up in a split second and get it right back there too. Trolling motor operation takes a lot of time and a lot of skill to do, especially if you're fishing like real bass fishermen should fish, around, you know, target oriented structures and some type of specific structure. If you're a live scoper and you're out there roaming around in open water in the lake, yeah, you probably don't need to have any skills with it, just like you don't have to have any skills in bass fishing to do that anyway with live scoping. But if you want to be a master at this sport and maximize the pleasure and the reward that it has, spend some time learning how to run your trolling motor, guys, and master it, just like mastering your casting techniques. And another thing with that is, when you approach a piece of cover on your trolling motor, before you approach that piece of cover, take note of like the sunlight angle and the direction of the shade that it's throwing off on that cover, and make sure that you position your boat accordingly to that. Sometimes you have to come straight into it, sometimes at an angle, sometimes from the bank throwing out. Always try to analyze the piece of cover that you're going to fish before you get there, to maximize and give you the highest percentage and the best casting angle that you need, which is the topic for another video. So anyway, guys, hope you guys are well. We'll talk later.